Good morning, Europe. A warm welcome to the program. Our top stories for you this hour. Brexit turmoil. Theresa May reshuffles her top team and fights off a leadership challenge after a string of resignations over Brexit. Plus, over in the Cube, our social media news desk.
The great Brexit betrayal or the best deal for Britain. We'll have all views from all sides of the Brexit divide.
The final push. Rescue divers race to save the last 4 boys and their coach still trapped in the Thai cave after a night of heavy rain. Trump's pick. Donald Trump picks a conservative judge for the Supreme Court with far-reaching implications for divisive issues from guns to immigration. And take a look at this image. We'll tell you why this picture has gone viral. Thank you for starting your morning with us. Our top story. First, she lost her Brexit minister. Now, she's lost her foreign secretary. Today, the UK Prime Minister Theresa May is battling for her political survival after simmering discontent over her European strategy finally boiled over. We will be speaking to our correspondents Vincent McAvenny in London and Brian Carter in Brussels. But before that, your news journalist Evelyn Laverick reports on a day of high drama in Westminster.
British Prime Minister Theresa May had a day of rolling with the punches as tensions within her party over Brexit came to a head on Monday. But at least she began with a sense of humour.
In the 2 years since the referendum, we have had a spirited national debate with robust views echoing around the cabinet table as they have on breakfast tables up and down the country.
Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn was quick to pounce.
2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50 being triggered, it's only this weekend that the Cabinet managed to agree a negotiating position among itself. And that illusion lasted 48 hours.
Indeed, the illusion was broken with the resignation of 2 cabinet ministers, including her Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, who left launching a scathing attack on May's Brexit strategy. In his resignation letter, he said the Prime Minister was leading the UK into a semi-Brexit and that the dream was dying, suffocated by needless self-doubt. May's response was to claim she was surprised in the light of productive discussions at the weekend. She's already replaced Johnson with Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
My principal job at a time of massive importance for our country is to stand foursquare behind the Prime Minister so that we can get through an agreement with the European Union based on what was agreed by the Cabinet last week in Chequers.
May's Brexit plan, which she thought she had backing for, will see the UK agreeing a common rule book with the EU for trading in goods but not services after leaving the bloc. It was a plan her chief Brexit negotiator, David Davis, felt impossible to back. But May says she's sticking by her compromise plan and has replaced Davis with Housing Minister Dominic Raab. The Prime Minister lives to fight another day. But the challenge now is to get the EU to listen to her Brexit proposals. Evelyn Laverick, Euronews.
Well, I'm joined now by Vincent McAvenny in Westminster. Vincent, a lot of movement all the way to late last night. It's a bad day for Theresa May and a bad start to her morning.
Well, an incredibly bad start to the week for Theresa May. She thought that she had finally, after 2 years within her own party, settled on a Brexit deal, only for those shock resignations in what is a very big week for her. Don't forget, she's got Donald Trump coming at the end of the week. She thought she'd be preparing for that, but a difficult start. And I'm joined now by Tom Swarbrick, who is a former senior advisor to Theresa May. Tom, how will have Theresa May reacted behind the scenes to those resignations?
Well, I think it was inevitable to a certain extent. It was obviously very quick. It was obviously quite brutal. I think with David Davis's resignation, the noises that he'd been making for some time about his concerns around the kind of deal that was going to be proposed made me think that it was pretty much inevitable that he was going to choose to step down. And all this comes really because the Brexiteers have had to choose. Theresa May put the final decision to them about what kind of relationship she wanted, and it was up to them to decide what to do. And I'm afraid Boris has decided to stand down as a result. I think that is perhaps less of a principled choice than David Davis's decision, and his resignation letter was pretty brutal too.
That resignation letter, I mean, he had himself photographed signing it. He said Britain would become a colony of the EU, and he said that the dream of Brexit is dying because of self-doubt. I mean, he couldn't have been harsher on the Prime Minister, could he?
I think that's fair. I think it was very florid, it was very verbose. It's the kind of style that people like about Boris Johnson, but it fundamentally did not propose another way. It didn't have a plan. It was nice language, but there was no substance to it, really. Yes, he's very angry about the way in which it's gone. Yes, he has been saying for some time privately that he's very cross about the way in which it's heading. But unless you're able to come up with an alternative, you're not going to be able to put a credible plan back to the European Union.
And Theresa May sent a somewhat catty response saying that she was surprised by Boris's resignation. I mean, she might have expected it from Boris Johnson, but do you think she was expecting it, though, from David Davis? And would she have taken it quite personally? Would it have been a panic for her?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the cattiness. The "I'm a little surprised" is sort of the written equivalent of her death stare. I thought it was certainly would have left its mark. Yes, I think whether she takes it personally, I'm not so sure. I can't help but feel that the way in which the reshuffle happened last night, the speed and the scale of it, because she moved quite a lot of senior people, which she'd been reticent to do in the past, indicated that actually Boris Johnson's resignation has already been priced in, that they'd already thought that this was possible, and they'd taken the steps to go around trying to move the back if he were to have resigned. So they've thought about it. It's clearly not taken them too much by surprise, because they knew he was not particularly happy about the direction of travel at the moment.
And she has done that reshuffle now with Dominic Raab becoming the Brexit Secretary. He's a favourite of the backbench Brexiteers. Jeremy Hunt promoted to Foreign Secretary. There was somewhat of an ultimatum yesterday, either saying change your Brexit plan or we will have a vote of confidence against you. How safe do you think the Prime Minister is now?
It's tricky. I think in the next sort of 24, 48 hours, if Boris Johnson wants to launch a leadership campaign now, I'm sure that he can corral enough people to submit letters to get the 48 letters that they need to start a vote of no confidence. The judgment that certainly the ERG, the European Research Group, has made, led by Jacob Rees-Mogg, is that she won't lose a vote of no confidence at the moment. The response at the 1922 committee seems to have gone quite well for her. Yes, these are very, very difficult hours still, the next 24, 48, but I don't see that she would lose a vote of no confidence at this stage.
Tom, thank you very much. Tessa, back to you. We'll have more throughout the day here on Euronews from Westminster.
All right, thank you for that, Vincent McAvenny there. And some fear yesterday's cabinet resignations could derail Britain's crucial Brexit negotiations with the EU. Well, the president of the European Council, Donald Tusk, took aim at the Boris Johnson and David Davis resignations, saying he hoped their departure could stop Brexit. But although the high-profile Brexiteers have left, for many in the EU, the problems surrounding Brexit remain. Our Brussels correspondent Brian Carter is joining us live now. Brian, what is the mood over in Brussels? We must have had reactions already.
Good morning, Tessa. Well, the official reaction here in Brussels has mostly been no comment. I mean, there's behind the scenes a sense of satisfaction almost, because this proves that it is not the EU that's breaking apart because of Brexit, but rather the UK government that's falling apart. Yesterday, during a press conference, Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Council, the European Commission, was asked about the resignation, and all he said was that this was a proof that there was unity in May's cabinet. So obviously, a lot of irony there from Jean-Claude Juncker. But as you said, perhaps the strongest reaction came from Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, who had this tweet that was widely shared on social media that read, "Politicians come and go, but the problems they have created for people remain. I can only regret that the idea of Brexit has not left with Davis and Johnson, but who knows?" So clearly, Boris Johnson will not be missed here in Brussels. This is a man, after all, that's been railing against Brussels and the EU ever since he was a journalist here decades ago. And one political group here in the European Parliament suggested that the only ones that will miss Johnson, perhaps, are cartoonists. Tessa?
Brian, just very briefly, do you think that this could stall the negotiations?
We'll have to see. I mean, the reactions that I said were pretty quiet so far. Perhaps one of the strongest came from the European Socialists and Democrats, who said that these resignations were the proof that nobody can deliver on what was promised, because what was promised is literally impossible. I also exchanged some text with an official from the European Conservatives and Reformists, which is the group to which the UK Conservative Party belongs to, and he actually didn't want to comment, saying that this was a matter of UK politics. And the same was echoed by Michel Barnier's spokesperson. Michel Barnier is, of course, the chief negotiator on Brexit for the European Commission, who said no comment, will continue working towards a deal. But there are two fears here in Brussels. First is on timing. As you know, the UK is set to leave the EU in March 2019, but it still needs to be, the final deal still needs to be ratified before. They were hoping to finish by October. That deadline seems unrealistic, and even December seems unrealistic. And finally, the EU is a bit in a dilemma. On the one hand, they want to get the Brexit that they want, but on the other hand, they know that if they push too hard, they risk to alienate more members of May's cabinet and losing Theresa May, and that they do not want, because who knows what will come afterwards, and that will raise the prospect of having no deal at all, which nobody actually wants.
All right, thank you for that, Brian Carter in Brussels there. Now, so how did social media react? There's been a lot of reaction to all this chaos happening in the UK, and Alex is following all the twists and turns. Alex.
Good morning, Tessa. Yes, is this the dream dying? Is this the great Brexit betrayal? Or is this perhaps the first credible plan for a Brexit? Well, here at Euronews, we are dedicated to bringing you all views and all voices from all sides of this discussion. And not for the first time, this issue is dividing not just people who voted Leave and Remain, but people who voted Leave. The Brexiteers are arguing they can't decide the best way forward. Let's just remind ourselves of Mr. Brexit, as he's been known, Nigel Farage, yesterday making comment on his radio show, publishing a piece in the Daily Telegraph now, saying that he's considering a return to politics if the government continues with what he calls the great Brexit betrayal. And that is a catchy soundbite. He's used it before and now it is back. And if he goes back to the front line, you can imagine a lot of people who voted Leave, if they're being told by one of the heroes of Brexit that this is a betrayal, it's going to be very difficult for the government to push through these plans. And in Boris Johnson's letter, as Vinny referenced, we heard that he described the Prime Minister's plans as making Britain a colony of the EU. Now, it's worth saying that the central point, I think, that's coming out here is the idea that these plans betray Brexit. They betray the very idea of Brexit. Zach Goldsmith, an ally of Boris Johnson, a friend of Boris Johnson, stood up for him saying, well, he's being accused of being opportunistic. But actually, in this case, his opponents would, he could save a child from a bus and they'd still call him opportunistic. He says here, this is basically Boris respecting the result of the referendum. So the idea the Prime Minister's betraying Brexit. Well, there's the other side, which is, of course, always around. Danny Blanchflower here, basically saying that in none of the resignation letters and in no interviews given afterwards have any of these Brexiteers come up with a plausible alternative strategy for Brexit. The idea here that, yes, they're attacking the Prime Minister's plans, but what's the alternative if they're saying Brexit's being betrayed? And I just want to bring up some comments we've had on our Euronews articles. You've been having your say. Tim Lewis here commenting that the only solution he wants to see is a clean break. This in support of Boris Johnson, in support of David Davis and those resignations. On the other hand, though, there are those attacking Boris Johnson, his integrity for deciding to step down at a time like this, saying, great news that one less clown in the cabinet is there. His loyalty is only to himself. He lost the argument and now he's thrown a strop. So what are your views? What are your thoughts? You can let us know. We want to hear from you on all sides. Let us know using #TheCube.
Thank you, Alex, as ever, for a very divisive topic again. And more to come for you on Good Morning Europe. In Thailand, 8 boys have now been rescued from the cave, but 4 boys and the football coach are still stuck underground. Rescue operations are set to resume today. We'll have all the latest from Shanghai. And Donald Trump has named Brett Kavanaugh as his nominee to join the Supreme Court Justice Judges. We found out why his confirmation is likely to be a hard-fought battle. That and a lot more after the break. Your top story on Good Morning Europe, battling for her political survival. After losing her Brexit secretary and her foreign minister, the British Prime Minister Theresa May is on the ropes as she struggles to defend her Brexit plan. Well, both left, citing that they didn't believe that the UK was going to get a good deal for a future relationship with the bloc. Now it is day 3 of rescue efforts and day 18 trapped underground for 4 young footballers and their coach in northern Thailand. 8 members of the team have been successfully brought out so far in a highly risky operation involving some 90 Thai and international divers. Well, it's hoped that today will be the final push to free those remaining. NBC News' chief global correspondent Bill Neely reports on the event so far.
Ambulance lights for once bringing good news. Another boy rescued, the 5th. Then as darkness fell, 3 more emerged. Mission accomplished for a second day. A rescue that's defying the odds. Ivan Karadzic was a diver on the first day's rescue.
They were very, very calm, and they are some incredibly strong kids. Considering they've been through what can only be thought to be an absolute nightmare for these guys.
It was an underground nightmare 2 miles long. The boys wearing face masks for hours, clinging to a guide rope and almost under the lead diver, another just behind. One passageway so tight, the divers had to take off air tanks to squeeze through. The soccer team went into the cave as a post-game field trip, but a flash flood blocked their way out. For more than 2 weeks, rescuers have cleared rocks, drilled passages and worked up to their necks in water to make this rescue possible. 8 of these boys are now safe, 4 and their coach still in danger. 3 of the boys who've been freed went to this school. Their friends now relieved.
Good feeling.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah.
One boy had skipped training with his friends on the day they disappeared to watch soccer on TV. Teachers and pupils have been told not to ask the boys questions about their ordeal when they return. It's not known which boys are the last to be rescued or why. Their coach is still with them. The Thai Navy SEALs messaged "Hu Ya" after today's success. The Thai Prime Minister thanked the divers outside the cave. Inside, they're getting ready for one final push. So this can be the final and 17th night for some patient little boys. Bill Neely, NBC News, Northern Thailand.
And NBC News' foreign correspondent Matt Bradley is in Chiang Rai, and he joins me live now from the hospital where the boys are being treated. Matt, good to see you there. Now, 2 weeks underground must have been very difficult for the boys. What do we know of their health?
Well, Tessa, we actually just got some fresh information about the status of the boys. As you mentioned, they're in this hospital behind me, those 8 boys who have already been released in 2 different operations over 2 days. We understand that they're doing remarkably well. They had some pneumonia, 2 of them had pneumonia originally. All of them showed symptoms of hypothermia upon being extracted from the cave. They were airlifted to this hospital, and now everybody seems to be doing fine. They show no signs of any serious conditions or illnesses. Some of them had slowed or irregular heartbeats. Now, almost all of them are walking around. They're capable of eating solid food, though doctors are trying to restrict their food intake, really just trying to keep them to, simple food, more liquid food, stuff that's easier to digest because Tessa, of course, 16 days underground. You can't just go into eating solid food immediately, but a little bit of a cute detail. They did ask for chocolate spread on bread, and the doctors said that's okay, and they gave at least the first 4 boys who have been in hospital now for about 2 days some of that chocolate on bread. So some of these boys got to have their first sweet snack. But we're not out of the woods yet, Tessa. We're about 2 hours into the latest operation. That's to extract those final 4 boys and their coach. But I should tell you, there are 9 people in that cave. In addition to the 5 who are trapped there, there are 3 Navy SEALs from the Thai military and 1 doctor. So 9 people have to be extracted. 2 hours into that. Now, the first operation on Sunday took 11 hours. Yesterday, it took 9 hours, and officials are expecting another 9-hour operation today. So the confidence level is up. The speed is up. Everybody is very optimistic about the progress, and they're saying they think that they're going to get these last 9 people out, the 4 boys and their coach included, just today. So stay tuned, Tessa.
All right, thank you for that bit of positive news there. NBC's Matt Bradley reporting there in Shanghai. Thanks. Well, to the U.S. now, where President Trump has nominated his choice for the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh is a former aide to George W. Bush, and he will have the power to sway top-level votes on legislation. A known conservative, Mr. Kavanaugh has promised to, quote, uphold the American Constitution. Now, NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams has this report.
With maximum drama in prime time, President Trump announced the nomination and praised Brett Kavanaugh as a solid conservative.
Judge Kavanaugh has impeccable credentials, unsurpassed qualifications, and a proven commitment to equal justice under the law.
A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law. A judge must interpret statutes as written, and a judge must interpret the Constitution as written, informed by history and tradition and precedent.
More than any of the others on the president's short list, Brett Kavanaugh knows his way around Washington. He grew up in nearby Maryland, where his mother was a state court judge, graduated from Yale and Yale Law, and was a Supreme Court law clerk for Justice Anthony Kennedy 25 years ago, at the same time as fellow Kennedy clerk Neil Gorsuch, who was put on the Supreme Court by President Trump last year. Kavanaugh met Kenneth Starr during a Justice Department fellowship and became a key staff member when Starr was the independent counsel investigating the Whitewater and Monica Lewinsky scandals. He helped write the final report that cited 11 possible grounds for impeaching President Clinton. He became a White House counsel and top aide to George W. Bush and met his wife, Ashley, while working in the White House. They have 2 daughters. President Bush nominated Kavanaugh to the Federal Appeals Court in Washington, D.C. At his Senate confirmation hearing, Democrats said he was too partisan.
You could not think of another nomination, given Mr. Kavanaugh's record, more designed to divide us.
After the hearing about that senator, my mom said to me, I think he really respects you, as only a mom can.
He was confirmed 57 to 36. He's been a judge for 12 years and says the years with Bush made him a better one. In a 2009 Law Review article, he said that experience convinced him that presidents should not be subjected to lawsuits or criminal investigations while in office, but said Congress should change the law to provide that exemption.
That was NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams reporting there. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, over 120 people have died in Japan after the worst flood in decades. Authorities are battling shortages of necessities for survivors. We will get the latest from our correspondent and over in the Cube.
Living among the rubble 1 year on, we will show you new videos from inside Mosul. But first, let's take a short break.
Welcome back to Good Morning Europe. Now, torrential rain in western Japan has caused the deaths of over 100 people and forced tens of thousands to flee their homes. The downpours have triggered floods and landslides, contributing to the greatest loss of life caused by rainfall in the country in over 30 years. Well, dozens of people are still reported missing. As the weather clears in some areas, search and rescue operations are underway to try and find survivors. But flood warnings are still in effect in some parts of the region. The latest of several recent natural disasters in Japan has prompted Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to put off a forthcoming overseas trip in favor of dealing with the crisis at home. Well, your news correspondent Chris Burns is in Osaka, in one of the prefectures affected by the floods, and he's joining me live now. Chris, this is quite a devastation for Japan. Can you bring us up to speed?
Yes, Tessa, as of last word, 138 dead. There's still dozens, more than 70 people still missing. 11,000 people are still being housed in temporary quarters and shelters. And of course, this rescue effort goes on. There are also many homes without power. It might fool you having the sun behind me, but there's still a lot of hardship going on. And as you said, there is still the threat of more rain and flooding. So that does go on. The rescue workers have been plucking hundreds, if not thousands of people off their roofs with boats and helicopters to bring them to safety. So that drama really played out over the weekend. And at this point now, they're hoping to find those people who are still missing. Tessa.
And what has the response of the government been? The Prime Minister has canceled his overseas trip clearly to deal with this. What more do we know?
Yes, well, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe does plan to come down to this region that was affected. As you said, this is an area that has been affected by natural disasters before. There was an earthquake recently in the same region. It's from here to Hiroshima that many places are affected. That trip that Mr. Abe was to take to Europe has been called off. It was to sign a trade agreement, a new free trade agreement with the Europeans. That's going to go on anyway. Later this next week, there will be either or and Donald Tusk of the European Council and Jean-Claude Juncker of the European Commission coming to sign it. So it will be officially a summit still happening, but in Tokyo and not in Europe. Tessa.
All right, thank you for that. Chris Burns in Osaka there. And coming up, all your top stories, including the latest on that high-stakes political drama in Theresa May's government over Brexit. Plus, more on that daring Thai cave rescue. But now divers have to deal with the threat of heavy downpours. And Turkey's Erdogan, he's put his son-in-law as the new finance minister. This is his latest move as the country's first executive president. But first, let's have a look at today's No Comment from Argentina, where protesters have taken to the street to protest against the finance policies of the government. Welcome back. Our top stories for you. Brexit turmoil. Theresa May reshuffles her top team and fights off a leadership challenge after a string of resignations over Brexit. The final push. Rescue divers race to save the last 4 boys and their coach, still trapped in the Thai cave after a night of heavy rain. And Trump's pick. Donald Trump picks a conservative judge for the Supreme Court with far-reaching implications for divisive issues from guns to immigration. UK Prime Minister Theresa May is today battling for her political survival after the resignation of 2 of her most senior cabinet members. Boris Johnson packed his bags at the Foreign Secretary's official residence in Carlton Gardens late on Monday night, saying that Brexit the dream is dying, he says. Well, his resignation follows that of chief Brexit negotiator David Davis, who accused the Prime Minister of, quote, giving away too much and too easily to the EU. Well, I'm joined now by News correspondent Vincent McAviney in Westminster, who's been following this story very closely. So, Vincent, Theresa May lost 2 big members of her cabinet. Can she keep a hold of her position?
Good morning, Tessa. Well, normally after 2 such senior resignations like this, a Prime Minister's days would be numbered, but we're not in normal time. And at the moment, she is managing to hang on and has done a reshuffle. I'm joined now by Tom Swarbrick, who is a former senior aide to the Prime Minister, Theresa May. Tom, how do you think the Prime Minister felt going to bed last night?
A long day, I think, would have been the conclusion from that. Not just because of the resignations of David Davis and Boris Johnson, but then she had to meet with the 1922 committee, very influential group of backbenchers, whom she had to try and persuade that her deal that she'd agreed at Chequers was the right way forward for the country. And there were a lot of people who would have been very, very unhappy about what the cabinet had signed up to and what DD and Boris Johnson were walking away from yesterday.
And the exchange of letters that she had with Boris Johnson was quite remarkable. Boris Johnson saying that she was turning the UK into a colony of the EU and saying she was racked by self-doubt. Theresa May saying that she was surprised at Boris's resignation. I mean, do you think that they'll ever be friends again after that?
Well, you said we're not in normal times. That was not a normal exchange of letters. Normally it's much more sort of friendly and open than that. I think there is... look, there was great respect between the 2 of them. I'd seen them together for some time and in cabinet and all the rest of it. They respected each other. I think there was... Boris was clearly not happy at the direction of travel, hadn't been for some time. And the Prime Minister had put up with quite a lot from Boris Johnson when it came to breaking cabinet collective responsibility, speaking out and sort of undermining, some might argue, some of the red lines that the Prime Minister had put her name to. So she had tolerated that for some time. She had said on Friday that cabinet collective responsibility was now fully restored, and I'm afraid the choice had to be made. It was either between the Chequers deal that the Prime Minister had got agreement for, or it was you're out, and he slung his hook.
And just quickly, Dominic Raab, the new Brexit Secretary, what assurances will he have to give to the Prime Minister to say that he would be able to get the Brexiteer backbenchers on side to keep her in place?
Well, that's going to be part of the job, I think. He's going to have to be read in incredibly quickly. He's a former lawyer. He's a clever guy. He was the housing minister before this. He'd been someone who should have been in the cabinet sometime before. But he's going to have to be read in very quickly because he's got a heck of a job to do over the next few months.
Tom Swarbrick, thank you very much. Tessa, back to you.
All right, thank you there. Vincent McAviney and Tom Swarbrick, thanks. Now to Thailand. All eyes are on the Thai cave where 5 people remain trapped after more than 17 days underground. There was both celebration and relief as 8 boys were safely brought out. Now they're being treated in a local hospital in Chiang Rai, but they're not quite out of danger just yet. NBC News' Janice Mackie-Freya reports.
The exhausted boys are in isolation. Not even their parents are allowed to see them. Quarantined because the risk of infection is so great, physical contact, even a hug, must wait until doctors say it's safe. Though officials say the 4 boys who came out Sunday are now eating normal foods like rice porridge. Divers involved in the rescue say the kids come out cold, hypothermia a real risk. And after days in the dark with little food, these survivors face a tricky recovery.
They're in the dark. They don't know if they're going to get saved. They don't even know if they're going to live, and they have no idea what their parents are going through.
Local media has released these photos of the team, who have not been seen in public. The 8 already out, not named. The most recent glimpses of the group showed them to be in good spirits.
They are lucky to be in there together, like 13 boys together. And if they are in there alone, it will be very more desperate.
Across Thailand, relief is beginning to set in. Families waiting near the cave for the last rescues. I told myself he'd be all right, said this aunt. I was worrying too, but I keep my feelings quiet. People who have worried now hoping to celebrate that the world's most watched soccer team is nearly home. Janice Mackie-Freya, NBC News, Chiang Rai, Thailand.
Well, the divers working on freeing the remaining 4 boys and their coach have been overcoming almost insurmountable obstacles inside the cave. Now, joining me live from the UK to talk more about this is Earth Sciences expert Dr. Lisa Baldini. Dr. Baldini, you've spent a lot of time in caves. Can you tell us what makes their conditions so difficult?
Well, the cave environment is not a very hospitable place. So the boys and the coach would have experienced complete darkness. Once the batteries ran out, in a cave environment like that, there's absolutely no light coming in. They would have experienced kind of the tightness of the air, a smell of clay. And then when the waters came in, those waters would flow through those tight chambers and passages, and the sound would reverberate. And that would be very intimidating to hear this cacophony of noise from the rushing water.
Yeah, and given those very difficult conditions, how would they have managed to stay inside that long before they were found? I mean, is the water drinkable? Are there air pockets inside? How would they have managed?
Well, luckily there was water, so they were able to drink. I imagine that they didn't bring a lot of food because they figured this was just a short visit into the cave, and so they had to do without food for many days. And so they would have kind of been very hungry, and they would have actually had this concern that nobody was going to be able to rescue them, and that would have been kind of the hardest thing, was dealing with the uncertainty.
Yeah, have you, just very briefly, I mean, what is the longest people can actually survive in caves? I mean, you spent a lot of time there.
Well, I mean, you can survive for a few weeks with just water, as long as you have water, you can survive for a few weeks. In a cave environment, though, there's a mental kind of stress that you undergo. And so, like one of the other interviewees had said, it was very good that they had each other with them. They had company, and so they had some reassurance from each other. If one of them had been on their own, or maybe just 2, they may not have survived because of the sheer stress of the situation. In this environment, because it's a tropical cave setting, there's a lot of bacteria that's active in the cave that's producing carbon dioxide, lowering the oxygen levels. So
indeed,
in this particular cave, sorry?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. Indeed, it is very difficult underneath. And as you say, the mental part of it could be even more difficult to surmount. Thank you very much, Dr. Baldin, Earth Sciences expert there. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
now,
you.
It's been 1 year since Mosul has been freed from ISIS militants, but new video is showing that the city, most of it is still in ruins. Alex has been following this story for us. Alex.
Yes, that's our team here in the Cube following as this story as new videos emerge showing Mosul. So let's just take you back. This is a picture from 1 year ago from the Iraqi Prime Minister showing victorious Iraqi forces declaring victory over the so-called Islamic State in Mosul. Now, this had been after 3 years of brutal occupation by ISIS militants. Well, how is the city looking 1 year after this victory was declared? New drone footage released shows it, as you can see here, mostly in rubble, as it was 1 year ago. Neighborhoods, schools, towns, districts of this city destroyed, still in ruins. You can see here cars going along, people continuing their life as best they can among the city. And we've seen some pictures we won't be showing you, showing that actually in some of these buildings there are still the remains of the dead. So people are living amongst the ghosts of the past very much in Mosul. Now, there's up to 8 million tons of debris, the United Nations estimates, needs to be dealt with here in Mosul. And almost 400,000 people are displaced from this city and the surrounding area. Let's just show you a picture from Médecins Sans Frontières, just giving you an idea of that destruction. We can have a little look at this, just showing you the extent of the destruction here. And also, Doctors Without Borders saying that 95% of trauma cases they're having in western Mosul are from people living amongst this rubble and this debris falling on them, and they're then having to go to hospital to be treated. It's also in hundreds of millions the estimated cost just to restore this city, to have its basic utilities, clean water, electricity, to have this as an environment safe for people. Despite that, though, life is starting to come back to normal. You could say the city's in ruins, but people are starting to rebuild their lives. This, a photograph taken by a local blogger showing people watching a concert live streamed from Austria in Mosul. Now, under Islamic State, music was banned. So from the debris and the rubble of Mosul, people rebuilding their lives, but a long way to go to restore that famous city.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. Indeed, a story of resiliency of the people there. Thanks. And still to come for you in Good Morning Europe, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been sworn in for another term as president of Turkey. Well, he will have new sweeping powers, and we find out what they involve and how the international community has reacted. And in case you missed it, the story of one devoted husband has gone viral. We'll find out why. That's after a short break. Top story on Good Morning Europe, battling for her political survival. After losing her Brexit secretary and her foreign minister, British Prime Minister Theresa May is on the ropes as she struggles to defend her Brexit plan. Well, both left, citing that they did not believe that the UK was going to get a good deal for a future relationship with the bloc. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been sworn in for another term as president of Turkey. Among those chosen for his cabinet is Erdogan's son-in-law, Berat Albayrak, who will lead the finance ministry. Well, changes to the governmental system mean that President Erdogan will have sweeping new powers. Euronews' Mark Armstrong has this report.
Turkey's President Erdogan was sworn in on Monday for a new 5-year term, as what some observers have dubbed a hyper-presidency. Erdogan was comfortably re-elected last month with 52.6% of the vote. Under controversial constitutional reforms approved by a referendum last year, Parliament has been weakened and the post of Prime Minister abolished. Those changes concentrate more power in the hands of the President. Since a failed coup attempt 2 years ago, he's fired 125,000 workers, the latest 18,000 at the weekend, and jailed 160,000 people. But he's also overseen a strong economy and he's built up considerable support across the country.
And to break down what Erdogan's new powers mean for Turkey is our correspondent, Alistair Sanford. Alistair, I mean, we see clearly here Erdogan exercising his new sweeping powers.
Yes, I think it's quite clear that he wants to concentrate power in his own hands, and we've seen that with the composition of the new government. As we've heard, his son-in-law, Berat Albayrak, has been appointed as finance minister. He's a former energy minister, but this has caused some surprise. The former finance minister is out. Out too goes the former deputy prime minister, Mehmet Şimşek. He's seen as market-friendly and was seen as a safe pair of hands, had ties to the old investors, and yet he's gone. It's led to wobbles on the markets. The lira dropped nearly 3% against the dollar. Erdogan said before the election that he wanted to take direct control of monetary policy. So there are questions as to whether the central bank there will be independent. Other appointments, the head of the army has become defence minister. That's never happened before. Only 4 ministers from the last government remain in the cabinet, and only 4 of the new team are elected. Now, I've been speaking to colleagues from Euronews' Turkish service, and they're surprised by the scale of some of these appointments. He's now the most powerful leader since Ataturk, the founder of the republic. His supporters say that this makes the political system stronger, but Erdogan's many opponents say that Turkey is no longer a democracy, it's an autocracy.
And so, Alistair, just very briefly, how is this going to be received, especially by his EU partners?
Well, I think the key to that really is seen at the inauguration. I mean, there were no Western leaders, major Western leaders there. There were some 50 high-ranking guests, 22 heads of state. But from Europe, only Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, the President of Bulgaria, Russia's Prime Minister. Instead, the leaders were from Africa and the Middle East and Venezuela, who Maduro there praising Erdogan to the hilt. I think we can expect Turkey to be even more nationalist in its foreign policy, leading to more clashes with Europe over human rights. And the war in Syria, for instance. And of course, the economy in Turkey is particularly weak.
Indeed, everyone keeping a close eye on this. Thank you very much, Alistair Sanford. Thanks. Now, South Korea has suspended its summertime civil defense drills aimed at preparing against an attack by North Korea. Well, the move by Seoul is aimed at keeping alive a positive atmosphere for nuclear diplomacy with the North. The United States and South Korea halted their annual military exercises following a summit last month between President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea have declared an end to the 2-decade-long state of war between the two countries. The official end of hostilities is expected to bring some stability to a region better known for its conflicts over their shared border. Well, the countries have also agreed to re-establish trade and diplomatic ties. And still to come for you will be in the queue for In Case You Missed It and the story of one devoted husband which has gone viral. That's after the short break. Welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Now, our next story, Britain's Prince William and Catherine Middleton have christened their 3rd child. In a ceremony attended by members of the royal family, the 5th in line to the throne, Prince Louis, was christened by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Queen and her husband, Philip, decided not to attend. That was a decision that was made some time ago. And now let's head over to Italy, where a story of devoted love has got everybody swooning. Alex has this nice story for us. Alex.
It has, Tessa. Well, it's both wonderfully uplifting and actually a little bit sad at the core as well. It's got a lot of people talking about it. And our team here at Euronews and Digital, our digital team, Lilo, has put together this story online. I'll tell you how you can read the full story in a bit. But let me just take you through it. This is the photograph of a 70-year-old widower in central Italy. Every day, he comes down here to the seafront with a picture of his late wife. He lost her 7 years ago. Her name was Ida. He comes down here every single day and he sits there. He met her at this spot. He says it reminds him of her and that, yes, he's aware that she has passed away, but that his love will never die. So he carries the photograph, as you can see there, down to the sea, sits there, and does this every single day. It's part of his routine. Now, we spoke to the photographer who took this photograph, and he told us a bit more of the story about it. Now, it's also worth saying that people are incredibly moved by the fact that this poor man has lost his wife, but also then they find it incredible that 7 years on, he's not looking back in a negative way. He's seeing her still as part of his life. It's got a lot of you talking. The photographer told us the full story, and the full article, if you would like to read it, as I'm sure you would, you can find it on Euronews' Twitter page. Just give us a follow and find it there. But it's got a lot of you talking this morning. Julia on Italian social media, on Facebook, saying, "I have never seen an image that can describe the meaning of love as well as this photograph. it's beautiful, even if so sad. That's certainly what a lot of us are saying this morning. It is beautiful, but also it is very, very sad as well. This one here from Antonio saying, a story that is simply moving and exciting. This was definitely a great love. Already, only to see this image does this. Basically saying it reminds him that this was truly a great love. So if you would like to see the full story, go onto Twitter, give us a follow, and you can read it there. Tessa.
Still is a nice story, Alex.
It's a very moving story.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Good Morning Europe. And in the meantime, we leave you with our no comment of the day from Mumbai in India. Another city flooded after days of heavy rain.
किधर? हाँ, एक मिनट।